Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Ranking the Albums here on this Sunday morning here in the States, alongside in the co-captain's chair. Here he is once again, Mr. Grant Arthur from Grant's Rock Warehouse and the Contrarians. What's
Here we
going
are.
on, man?
Nice to be here today.
Yeah, it's a crisp fall day here in New York. Sun is shining, still no rain. Everything is dry as can be, and the leaves just turn crinkly. And yeah, I can't even like if I wanted to do like a fire in my fire pit, I wouldn't even trust doing it right now because I'd be afraid of something catching fire. It's so dry here. It's ridiculous.
Oh, well, it's
I don't
pretty
know how
dry
it is
here.
in
Well, it's
Ohio,
not
but
too bad.
no, yeah, it's bad here.
No, it's not too bad. Well, we've got sun. We've got the leaves have just started to really change into, reds and yellows. I mean, a lot of it was so dry that some of my one tree in the backyard was just losing leaves, just turning brown and just
Well,
losing
that's
leaves
what's
because of
happening
no
here.
water.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's nothing. It's not beautiful at all. Like we went up to vacation up to the Finger Lakes last week, and everything up there is lush and green and reds and yellows and all orange colored leaves. Here it's just brown and just ugh. It's just we've had no rain since like August, hardly at all. And so the leaves, like you said, are just turning brown and falling, and everything that's on the ground is like, you know, crisp, dried out leaves. It's just, yeah, it's desolate looking already. But what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do? You know what we're all gonna do? We're gonna talk about the Yardbirds.
There
That's
we
what
go.
we're gonna do. So Grant and I were just kind of talking. So we're gonna do five albums here. We're gonna do the U.S. releases. So I know we have a lot of folks that watch from across the pond, and there's different. This is this weird time in the mid '60s where you have bands mostly doing singles, but then putting out albums, and you have an album release in the UK that's different from the album release here in the States, different titles, different track listing, blah, 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 blah. This is a crazy time for a couple of years, right up until about, I think, what, 68 or so, Grant, where I think it started to kind of
Well,
solidify.
once we had Rubber Soul hit and you've had Revolver, which, you look at those and those are really albums. It
Yeah.
wasn't till the Beatles came along and changed everything. When Pepper came around, that solidified it. Of course, you had Pet Sounds before. That's truly an album, almost a concept album. Things were changing. Birds, Younger Than Yesterday, truly an album. There's not anything weak on it, but things were changing as the 60s progressed. But when the Yardbirds started out in 64, 65, we're still basically a singles band. But
Yeah.
that was normal.
Yeah.
But the releases in the States, the thing I do have to give credit to, like Epic back then, is that, they took for the first Yardbirds album in the UK, the first Yardbirds album was a live album. And here in the States, it was the studio album, but basically it has have some new tracks on it. It does have some old tracks, which were singles, but here in the States, we combined everything. We always would put the singles on these records, like the Beatles. Look at the Beatles catalog.
Yeah.
Totally different than what the UK had, but the UK never put their singles on albums. Here in the States, Meet the Beatles was a combination of album tracks and singles. This is Yardbirds were treated no differently.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Sure.
they had a more of a studio catalog in here than they did in the UK. So
That's true. That's true. And even like was the second album here was he had a studio side with the new guitar player and then a live side with the old guitar player, right? So it's just
you
they're
had
like
like
these,
five live Yardbirds on side two. So they still were combining things.
yeah,
All those tracks basically got out over here, I think, because
yeah,
don't forget there were still singles. They were releasing singles. It was just packaged differently. But
yeah,
I look at those Epic albums as kind of like, well, those are their albums. If you want an
sure,
album,
yeah,
those are those,
they're
and that
there.
be that.
So I've never owned anything by the Yardbirds other than this collection, which has two discs on it and basically has just almost everything that we're going to talk about today, minus a few things here and there. Um, all sorts of stuff here. And that's all I ever got because, quite frankly, it's hard to get some of these individual CDs, and I'm sure you can find the LPs out in the wild if you're a vinyl person. But I bought this because back when this first came out, and I don't even remember when this first came out in the '90s. It's called the Ultimate Yardbirds because it's got most of their their songs that you'd want on here. So it's got the Giorgio Gamelski era, it's got the Simon Napier Bell era, the Peter Grant era, and then some additional things. So, whatever. But we're going to talk about the five albums today. So starting off, we're going to go with For Your Love, 1965. We're going to go Having a Rave Up with the Yardbirds, also 1965. We've got Over, Under, Sideways, Down from 66. You got Little Games from 67. And then, of course, the reunion sort of album, which we've decided to throw in here, Birdland from 2003. And of course, you showed one of the album covers there. So, of course, you've got in the
This is
UK,
Roger the Engineer.
Roger the Engineer, which is basically the same as the album that I mentioned here in the States.
Yeah, Over, Under, Sideways, Down. Same record, maybe a couple of tracks are different, but essentially, it pretty much lines up with the UK and the USA release of lineup. So,
Yeah. So I was saying to Grant before we started recording that I had a hard time with this ranking, and he was surprised I said that. But my reason is that I don't find any of these albums. I want to watch my words here. I don't
be
find
careful,
any of these
Pete. Be
albums.
careful, Pete.
I know. From an album perspective, I
Hmm.
I find fault in all of them. I don't think any one of them from start to finish is a drop dead classic. I think there are a lot of drop dead classic songs in this catalog.
Hmm.
I just don't think any of I think if I were to take out all of my, I don't know, 10 or 15 favorite songs from throughout this whole catalog and put them all on one album, that's an amazing record. But I think all of these albums have really good stuff on them, and they have stuff that I just don't get it. I'm not into at all. So,
I totally understand. It's
so you
just
see where
that
I'm coming from
era.
there? Yeah, yeah,
They'd have one or two great songs, and then there'd be a lot of filler.
yeah,
I must say though, for the Yardbirds catalog, they didn't really write anything until they got to 1967.
yeah. It's a lot of covers. Yeah, yeah.
A lot of covers, but a lot of bands did that. The Beatles did it, the Rolling Stones did it.
Yep.
The Beatles, when they came out, Beatles were the ones that changed everything because they were all self-contained. They all sang, they all played, they all wrote everything. And that just totally changed everything from that moment on. The Yardbirds kind of caught up to that in 1967. Roger the Engineer, they wrote everything. I think that they had a fairly good, I think it was pretty successful. Um, but are they the Beatles? Are they the Rolling Stones? No, they're not. If let's say this, if we didn't have Jeff Beck or Jimmy Page or, you know, Eric Clapton in the band, would we have ever really heard the Yardbirds?
Arguably not, right?
You
Yeah,
don't know what talks about the Animals. The Animals were great, basically doing the same thing the Yardbirds were doing. We never hear about the Animals, and they have a great catalog, but they did the same thing, R&B, but they didn't have those guitar players. Now, when I listen to these records again, I've listened to these since the 80s when I was taking everything in. The guitar playing really is the star of the show.
yeah, yeah.
And when Jeff Beck gets in the band, things really start to take off. I mean, they were just doing straight R&B, blues stuff with Clapton, and nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that. But Jeff Beck, the showman, the guitar player, took the Yardbirds to another level where were much more energized to my ears, you know, much more exciting. You hear some of those live cuts. Well, most of the stuff the live heard live is all Eric Clapton.
Well,
And I'll
Clapton,
tell
yeah,
you, Pete, though, for 1965, and a band in that era, like Five Live Yardbirds, when you hear those live cuts, they sound pretty damn lively, and there's a lot of excitement. They have a lot of energy, and they're a good band,
yeah.
great band. And I think Eric Clapton sounds great on it. I mean, think about the era. This is the era everyone was playing flat wound strings. Strings were 12 gauge, I don't think we had round wounds until Ernie Ball developed them in the later 60s. People were playing with, really thick strings. And the fact that they could do what they could do with what they had, it's pretty great.
Pretty cool. I
That
also
was a
think
tangent.
too.
I don't know where I was going with that, but
Well, I think what we started talking, the early with, well, it goes back to the guitar players, right? Because I think with Clapton in the band, I don't think they were ever going to embrace that whole psychedelic aspect of
no.
their music with him, because that's not him, right? It's almost like, he's the bluesy guy in the band. Because if you listen to the music once Beck came in the band, and certainly with Page, they embraced that whole psychedelic aspect of things.
And I totally
Things get
agree
a little
because,
weird at times, right? But yeah,
well, the reason Clapton quit was because of For Your Love.
yeah,
He thought it was a too poppy.
too
I
much of a
think
pop
For Your
song.
Love's great as a pop single,
Yeah, it's great.
but really, Eric, I just find it hard because if you listen to some of that later Eric Clapton stuff, it's as poppy as you can get.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
And I get it, you were a blues purist. I'm not trying to make anybody mad, but I just find it odd that later in life he's just making pop songs. And then, but the Yardbirds, what would have happened if Eric would have kept going? I think, me personally, I think Jeff Beck was the proper choice because he knew exactly what to do with them. And he's, of course, he's my favorite guitar player of all time. And I think it's just great stuff. But anyway, I think we probably yapped enough. We can probably rank now. I
let's
don't
get
know.
to the ranking, right? So we got five albums. We'll do two at a time, I guess, like we normally do, and then our
That's
do our
fine.
final one at the end. So two, two, and
All
one.
right. All right. So my number five is going to be Birdland. Of course, they put this together in what, 1994, I think. Jim McCarty and Chris Draja. I don't know what the point was to get this back together. Maybe it was as a tribute. We have a lot of guest musicians on here. We've got Joe Satriani, we've got Steve I think Brian May's on a track. Jeff Beck is on one track.
Yeah,
Um,
Slash is here too.
yeah, so it's this. I look at it as more of a tribute. We've got a vocalist, and I cannot remember his name. Lead. Wait a minute. Who was the lead singer?
Oh, hang on.
John Iden.
John Iden. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with his work, but boy, does he sound like Keith Ralph. He can take these original Yardbird songs and take them into the, uh, oh, what's happening? Something just popped up.
Yeah, don't worry about it. It's just me doing. Yeah, it's doing weird stuff. Zoom is doing weird stuff.
Yeah,
It's
I've
saying that.
never seen it do this, and I'm going, wait a minute.
Yeah,
Part of inviting you to do something. I'm going, oh,
yeah. You don't
sorry.
need to just. Yeah, it's for whatever reason. Instead of me just sharing the image of the album, it's telling me that I can invite everybody else to do
All
that.
right, I've never seen that before.
Yeah.
Very odd. Okay, sorry.
Anyway,
Storm.
there's the album we're talking about right there. That's Birdland.
Okay. So anyway, so yeah, it seems more like a tribute to the band. I don't see much of a point to it because we're doing a lot of remakes of what they've already done. I'm Not Talking was the Mose Allison song, which is great. The Yardbirds version, the original version's phenomenal. Why do it again? We've got a Jim McCarty song for Crying Out Loud, which doesn't sound like the Yardbirds. I'm assuming it's just a new track that they're throwing
There's a
out
couple
there.
of new ones on there. Yeah, yeah.
But no.
You ever get the
Is it
impression that
worth
they didn't want to do a whole new album of all new stuff because nobody would be interested all these years later. So they threw in a couple new tracks and then all the rest are reworkings of older stuff with guest stars.
I just find it I could I'm not sure. Is this a money grab? What's the point? You've got Jeff Beck on one track. You don't even have Jimmy Page on it.
Right.
I mean, if you were really going to do this project, let's get Jeff Beck, get Jimmy Page back in,
And Eric. You need them
and
all.
Eric, have them all in there, and then I think people would pay attention. This album sounds fine as a tribute, but it's basically a cover band. I mean, we don't have Keith Relf anymore. It's just, I just don't know what the point of it was, you know?
All these
I
years later. Yeah.
all these years later, because that's a big span of time when this
Oh,
came out,
huge.
1994,
Yeah.
20 years. But I think it's fine. I don't take it seriously. I think it's just a nice tribute to the band. And they do have the one track on there, an original man that they dedicate to, Keith Relf. So I think that's nice. Maybe it is a tribute to Keith. Or I think it's great. But I would have liked to have seen Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page contribute more. Um, but it's okay. I'm not even sure I considered a Yardbirds album, but it does say the Yardbirds, so
See, we were kind of on the fence with including it or not, but we figured, yeah, why not? Because I bet you
well,
most people don't even know about it.
they don't. But the question is, wasn't Jim McCarty part of Box of Frogs? This seems more like the Box of Frogs because the Box of Frogs had a lot of different people involved,
Right.
kind of revolving door. Why wouldn't you just make another Box of Frogs album as opposed to a Yardbirds album, unless you're trying to make a buck?
Yeah. Yeah.
Those Box of Frog albums, they put two of them out in the 80s. Those were fine. Those were great. I don't know. Maybe someone in the comments can fill us in on that.
Enlighten
I
us.
just don't enlighten us because I don't know.
Yeah.
And I hadn't heard this until we decided to do this show. So, but is it necessary? No. Stick with the original Yardbirds
Yeah.
material, and I think you'd be fine.
I think for most folks watching, this will be a curiosity listen. You can go listen to it on YouTube, and there you can hear Steve Vai and Satriani and Brian May and Slash and all these people playing these classic songs, and they all sound great. But I will say, Steve Vai comes in on one of the tracks. It's like, wow, listen to him, but it's almost like it doesn't mesh. It's just like, you know, let's just throw
Every
some
time Steve I comes on, I go listen to him. That's what I do. I go, whoa,
because yeah, it's
I love Steve I.
oh yeah, oh yeah. I
Oh,
just saw him a
dang.
week ago, man. Whew, holy cow, so good.
All right. So that's my number five. Is it really a Yardbirds album? Let us know down in the comments. Number four, I'm gonna go with Little Games. Now, this is the first record with Jimmy Page. Though Jimmy Page, what we do have a couple of tracks that were on. Well, this is Roger the Engineer, but the reissue, Psycho Daisies and Happening 10 Years Ago, are two tracks in which Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page both play. No, they both played lead guitar on Happenings 10 years ago. And I think Jimmy Page is just playing bass on Psycho Daisies. Those could have been part of this, but they weren't. We don't have very much crossover. And Blow Up, that film Blow Up, where they
That's
did
right.
the song Stroll On,
Yep.
that's got Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. So there's only like three tracks when they were, you know,
Still there
both
together. Yeah.
still there together. So by the time Little Games comes out in July of 67, there's no Jeff Beck. I mean, what I understood is that Jeff wasn't showing up for gigs and he was sick or something, and they kicked him out. Just kept Jimmy Page.
It's like you're no
Moved
longer playing
Chris.
bass anymore, dude. You can pick up that guitar.
Yeah. But hey, but there are some great things on Little Games. The thing that didn't jive with the band, from what I understand, is that Mickey Most, who did Donovan, he was a pop producer. There's a lot of pop on here, but there's also a lot of psychedelia on here as well. It's a real mismatch of stuff. So, how does it work as an album? Well, how did how does this work as an album? It's just kind of a mismatch of material. Now there is some great stuff on here. The single Little Games, much more psychedelic. It failed here in the States. It only got to like 51. This album hardly sold. In fact, if you know anything about this record, they never even put this out in the UK because they weren't Epic over there were going, well, I don't know about this record. They weren't behind it. So it never came out until later. But here it came out in the States, but it didn't do very much. But it's quite different than the other Yardbird stuff. Um, but Little Games was a single. It didn't do anything. I don't have a problem with it, but it does seem to be more poppy. This song probably would drive Eric Clapton up the wall. Eric would not be a part of this. He would have abandoned ship. But you do have a lot of influence on here by Jimmy Page. Um, I was reading something about it, and evidently he was not happy with, Jimmy Page could have produced it. I mean, he was a session musician. He knew what he was doing, but somehow I'm not sure exactly. But maybe you know why Mickey Most was producing the record. I'd rather had Paul Samuel Smith produce it like he did on the previous record because that was good results. But who knows? The Yardbirds were a very complicated band. Um, but Little Games, a pop single that failed. I don't have a problem with it. Yeah, it's psychedelic. Smile on Me is another boogie number, boogie blues number. It's like them going backwards. And the way I look at this record is that these guys could have kept going forward, from the Jeff Beck era, but they just kind of didn't know what to do when I listened to it because it's all these different styles. But yeah, it's just a step back, but it's just a boogie blues number like they did in 1965. White Summer. Okay, this is nice. This is a Jimmy Page acoustic number. Just Jimmy playing. And I guess he's done a lot of this later when in Led Zeppelin
It's
Live.
like one of those Zeppelin raga tunes, man. It's just
Yeah, yeah.
right. Yeah.
But I hear this and I'm going, wow, this really is lovely. He's using alternate tunings. Not many people did that. Um, and it's really a lovely song. Does it fit on the record? No, but it kind of gives you like a glimpse of what's coming. It
Yeah.
would fit perfectly on a Led Zeppelin album,
Yeah.
but I like it. In fact, I love it. I think just to live, I love when Jimmy Page is playing acoustic, to be but quite honest. I mean, I love Jimmy as a player. He might be a little sloppy, but man, him as in the studio, Pete, what a master. And
Oh yeah.
what a great player. I don't care. Great acoustic player. I love it. Now, the track that I really like on this record is Tinker, Tailor, Sailor, Soldier, Sailor. Say it real fast.
Tinker Tailor
Tinker,
Soldier Sailor.
Tailor, Soldier, Sailor. I love that track. I think that's as good as anything that might have come on this album, which, yeah, I'm rating this higher. That it could have fit on there perfectly. I think it was where who wrote it? Jimmy Page McCarty. Great song. It's kind of reminds me of like mid 60s Who Sell Out, kind of that era, kind of psychedelic.
It
I
totally
love it.
sounds like the Who or the Small Faces to me.
Yeah.
Totally.
And
You know.
and I love that period of the Who, and I love the Small Faces, so I'm good. Glimpses, we've got another one of those Eastern influence tracks. Now you're going to find in the whole Yardbirds catalog, there's a lot of Eastern influences. There's guitars sounding like sitars, uh, very psychedelic. Is it filler? Could be considered filler. It's not. They're not advancing. The Yardbirds just did one thing good, and they just kind of do what they do, and they don't really advance on any of these records. They just kind of put out more of the same. Um, Drinking Muddy Water, we're back to the blues. You've got Harp, written by the band. That's good, but
Yeah.
we're just doing a 145 blues number. That's fine. No Excessive Baggage just comes off like a pure pop tune to me. One that would make Clapton cringe. The band sounds fine, but something's missing. I think the backgrounds are a bit weak on this because usually you've got pretty good background vocals. I don't know if it's all Keith Relf doing the backgrounds, but something when you have like a wall of Keith Relf doing backgrounds, I don't have any issues with it. He's got a particular sound.
Yeah.
Um, but is it? I don't know. I think it's fine. I don't know. I think Jimmy Page on here, it sounds wonderful, but it's just substandard material. I don't think it's all that great. And I don't who wrote it. I don't know anything about the writers of that song. It's not by the band. And I do want to mention there are a lot of tracks on here that are there are band tracks, there are outside writers. And I don't think that I don't think the band had much to do with that. They kind of here's what you're playing. This is the kind of thing that I kind
Very
of
well.
vibe that I'm picking up. But I think you get the idea. Only the Black Rose acoustic track with Ralph singing. It kind of reminds me of early Led Zeppelin, written by Keith Ralph. Fine track. I have no problem with it. But yeah, you put Robert Plant on this, it could be on a Led Zeppelin album.
Yeah.
Jimmy Page has such a powerful stamp that it just kind of reminds me of poor man's Led Zeppelin, let's be honest, with bad songs. The only other one that's kind of wild that ends the whole thing is Little Soldier Boy. I like this track. It's kind of like early Pink Floyd. Um, my whole thoughts of this. Okay, you know what this reminds me of? Let's see if this what does Little Soldier Boy remind you of? I'm putting you on the spot.
But you want to put me on the spot. Hold on, because I
You're on the
did write.
spot.
All right.
What do you
I
think?
think Little Soldier Boy
I'm gonna just let you think about it for a
reminds
second.
me of the Moody Blues.
Reminds me
Something.
of the Pretty Things, SF Sorrow. How's that?
Yeah.
Which SF Sorrow is another great record. Jesus. See, that's a total album, you know?
Yeah.
Anyway, I went on a rant on Little Games, but you get the idea. I think this would have been a good EP. Little Soldier Boy. Let's just go ahead and keep uh what I don't know. Tinker Tailor, well, I don't know. You could pick your own tracks, but I think if you could cut it down, weed it out. I don't want to go through it and weed it out now. Do that on your own time. I think it would make a decent EP, not a great record. So that's my
I
stance
think you could
on
say that about any of these albums.
I agree, but this one more than others, I think.
All right. I totally get that. All right. My number five is also Birdland. I mean, yeah, whether you consider it a true Yardbirds album or not, that's up to the listener, I guess. McCarty and Dredge are here, and then a couple other guys. Jippy Mayo on lead guitar. I don't know who the hell that is. John Adan on bass and vocals. I don't know who he is. Alan Glenn on percussion and harmonica. I've never heard of these guys before or after. But you got Skunk Baxter, you got Beck on here, you got Steve Lukather, Brian May, Joe Satriani, Slash, Steve Vai. Basically, the only reason to listen to this is to hear these familiar songs and hear what the soloists bring to the table. I mean, I think Lukather is amazing on, he plays on the Happenings 10 years time ago. I think it's one of the best solos, I think, on the whole thing. Vi is great on here. Satch is great. It's all good, but do we really need it? I think honestly, like you, I had never heard this before. We started getting ready to do this show, and I think it's better than I thought it would be. But would I ever need to listen to it again or own it? No, not at all. So yeah, Birdland is my number two. Is my number five. My number four is. Let me get the image here going for you. I'm sure you already have it, but let's hold on. This
Buttons
present's
are hard.
this ridiculous. Here we go. All right. So it is bingo.
Oh,
My number four is Having a Rave Up with the Yardbirds from 65, their second album. So, and I'll tell you why. I like a lot of this actually. You got Beck has already replaced Clapton in the band, but yet we're doing, like we said before, side A is all the Beck stuff, the new studio stuff, and then side B or two is live stuff previously heard in the UK live with Clapton. So I really like the studio stuff here. I mean,
no.
obviously, Mr. You're a Better Man Than I is a terrific, terrific bluesy psychedelic track. I mean, the bass line is so good in that. Beck is just really, really good. Evil Hearted You is just drenched in reverb. Very, very cool song. Um, it's very dated sounding, but that's okay because it is 1965, right? I'm a Man is an old Bo Diddley classic, right? It's fun, for what it is. What's really amazing here, and I hadn't heard this in so long, Still I'm Sad, which is this really weird kind of haunting kind of pop song. And then I grew up with the Rainbow version on Rainbow Live on Stage with Ronnie James Dio singing, and it's completely different than the original version. So different, but still cool here in the original. It's like cool. Heartful of Soul could be my favorite Yardbird song.
Classic.
I mean, that's just
Classic.
amazing. I almost wanted to rank this higher just for that because it's just such a great song, and Jeff Beck just rules on it.
He
And then
rules.
yeah, he does. I mean, he rules anyway, right? And then you got Train Kept It Rolling finishes at side one,
Oh,
and that's great, right? Side two, you got the live stuff. You got a lengthy version of Smokestack Lightning, but it's a fucking harmonica. It's like I want to hear some Clapton guitars on it. It's like whatever.
yeah. Clapton's kind of in the background to some degree
And
on
and
this.
that's the reason why this is my number four, because I think the live stuff doesn't give him any room to shine at all. Again, we have another version of I'm a Man. It's like, okay, whatever. You got Respectable by the Isley Brothers. That's cool, right? And Here 'Tis, I think the closing number is probably the highlight for me of all the live stuff. But for me, I think the live versions here are a little bit of a letdown, whereas side one is great. So that's why this made it to my number four. I wanted to rank it higher strictly for a couple tracks, but I'm like, you know what? I could do without side two. It just doesn't really move me all that much. But side one is great. So that's my number four.
Well, you know what's also odd is that there is a studio version of I'm a Man and there's a live version of I'm a Man on it.
Yeah. It's I don't know who planned
Who
that,
put
but
this together? You know,
yeah.
there are other songs you could have put on here,
Yeah,
but
for sure. No, for sure. I mean, they had other singles and things, whatever. It's just yeah,
I do agree with you that first side of this record, you
it's
can
really
just
good.
tell. I know I'm not on this one yet, but I just want to elaborate is that once you got um uh brain problem Jeff Beck on here, it totally the band is now fully on using all their cylinders.
Yeah.
They're ready to go because Jeff just brings a whole level of excitement. and his playing on here, doing all these weird, we'll get to it, but he does a lot of different things. I mean, he's a showman, but
Yeah.
he's also so great. And I think it just kind of brought the band up and, re-energized them. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think the first side on this is great.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. All right, what do you got for number three?
All right, my number three, I am gonna go with once I scroll up to it. There's two. Where's three? Come on, Grant. Number three. All right, I'm gonna go with For Your Love. Came out in June of '65. Giorgio Gromelski, producer. Great opener on this track. As you know, this was all put together by, I believe, Giorgio put this together. I don't know. Was Giorgio a manager or was he a producer?
I
He
think
produced it, but wasn't he their manager as
he
well?
might have been. Yeah, he might have been.
Anyway, starts off with For Your Love. Great opener. Is it harpsichord? Is it a, I'm not sure. Or is it, I don't know. I think it's harpsichord, but God, it's a great song. It got up to top 10, like one of their biggest hits that they ever had in the US and the UK. In fact, I think that because of that hit is why they put this album together. Um, but this is the song, like we mentioned, Eric Clapton hated it. He left. That was the end of Eric. But it's great. It's got bongos and it's a Graham Goldman song, and I love it. I'm Not Talking, which was on Birdland, Mose Allison's song. Golly, you just listen to Jeff Beck on here. He's just his playing style is just so wild compared to Clapton,
Right.
just so unruly. And it's like a breath of fresh air because Clapton's just kind of, with his silo, and Jeff Beck is just a
Doing
machine
whatever. Yeah. Yeah.
doing whatever. Put it in your hands, you've got Eric Clapton. Um, there's many versions of this. The Shirelles did a version of this. I mean, I think this came back out in like 1962, but when I listen to it, I think this is the definite version. When I think of Putty in Your Hands, this is my version. I have no problem with it. It's great. Like I said, on this record, there's no psychedelia here yet. Maybe just a pinch because we're early. We're in '65. There's not much of that going on. But we have Jeff Beck in there, and he's just psychedelic in his own way. Ain't Got You, another Clapton one. Oh, I must mention that this is a mix between Page. This is a mix between Clapton and Jeff Beck. So it's got mostly Clapton, but okay. Ain't Got You, another great song. Animals did it. Aerosmith did it. Blues Brothers did it, for crying out loud. It's just the standard 1960s cover song that you just did. Here we've got an instrumental, Got to Hurry. It's a Clapton instrumental. Kind of shows off his chops a little bit. This was the B side of For Your Love in the UK. I think it's okay. Is it filler? Maybe. A lot of these are just kind of, it's just a whole bunch of tracks put together, ladies and gentlemen. I Ain't Done Wrong, which is Jeff Beck. Sounds like sure sounds like Got to Hurry. It's just a typical rock and roll 1-4-5 chord progression. That's all this whole album is. But like I've written on here, I said Beck tends to show excitement though. The band just sounds more wound up. This was a Keith Relf song, so it's okay. We've only got one song on here in which a band member has written. I Wish You Would's Clapton. Uh, it's fine. More of the same. Um, I want to mention that, yeah, this was like their debut single, and there's a lot of harp on here. I mean, if you like harmonica, Keith Ralph is your man because he plays a lot of harp on this stuff. It's very upbeat, much more like in that Bo Diddley kind of vein. A Certain Girl, one of my favorite Yardbird tracks. Um, Originally recorded in 1961 by Ernie K. Doe, whoever that is. But again, going, they're picking out songs that they like. And it's pretty lively solo from Eric on this one, because normally he's kind of low key, like you mentioned, but he's pretty lively on this one. And this was released in a single in the USA in August of '64, and it didn't do anything. Um, I could keep going. You got a version of My Girl Sloopy, The McCoys did a version of it. They are the ones that everybody turns to for Sloopy. That's a great track. Go Bucks. The OSU uses it for their, song. I don't know. This isn't the definite version the McCoys is, but I think the Yardbirds do a decent version of it. You've got Good Morning Little Schoolgirls, another Clapton song, blues standard. You get the idea. This album is just pulled together from old tracks for the US market to capitalize on For Your Love. So that's basically the reason it exists. Uh, but as a record, though, I mean, they're all the same kind of songs. So I guess it fits as an album. Um, but I just like other stuff ahead of this. So that's my number three. My number two, I'm going to go with scroll. Number two. Okay. The one that you already showed, Having a Rave Up with the Yardbirds. So this came out in November 65. This album, you've got Jeff Beck, like you mentioned, Pete, all on side one, Eric Clapton on side two. All right. So, what do I think of this? Well, You're a Better Man Than I. Jeff Beck, great opening riff, strong bass by Samuel Smith. Great opener with Beck because, oh, dang, there's a lot of excitement. One of the best Yardbird tracks, and Beck is all over this. You kind of get a little bit of that Middle Eastern type of flair in it. I love it. Evil Hearted You, Graham Goldman song, and you know how many artists did Graham Goldman songs in the UK during that British invasion? A lot. Herman's Hermits, The Hollies. This is another great Graham Goldman song, Evil Hearted You. This was released in the single in the UK. And okay, I'm throwing it out here, but if you listen to that riff, that seems pretty damn heavy for 1965. Could this be a precursor of heavy metal? When I hear a lot of this stuff from Beck and his riffs, this also has a slide solo from Beck. And right then, I mean, the riff is heavy. Yeah, it's 1965 heavy, but man, it's the heaviest thing that I even know about at this point.
Yeah.
Beatles haven't done Helter Skelter, which is the heaviest thing ever.
Blue Cheer hasn't quite hit yet.
No,
Hendrix hasn't hit yet. Cream's not hasn't hit
it's
yet.
pretty
So,
heavy. And man, Jeff Beck on a slide solo in 1965. Beck was a monster even back then on those big flat wound guitar strings. Man, I'm a Man studio version with Beck playing. Great. Bo Diddley, I love this version of it. I love the Yardbird version. Still, I'm sad. You've got that eerie Gregorian chant thing going, like you mentioned. Great track, Beck on a volume pedal, and it's heavy, minor key heavy. Makes me sad when I hear it,
you should
but
should.
it's heavy. Still, I'm sad's heavy. 1965 heavy, but I can't think of anybody that sounds quite like this band at this time. Who's doing anything like this? Eerie, Middle Eastern, Gregorian chant like stuff. I have to hand it to him. I think that Jeff Beck was great for this band. Um, Next song's Heart Full of Soul. Come on.
Yeah.
Another great Graham Goldman song. Big hit in the UK and the States. Jesus. And this is where you've got Jeff Beck. We've got that Middle Eastern influence again, probably from Rubber Soul, I'm assuming.
What
Jeff
guitar
Beck
was
has
he
that
playing? What
sitar
was he
riff on it.
playing? Yeah, what was he playing back then? Because he's got that kind of twangy
Les,
thing, like
well, he
because
played a Les Paul and a Fender Esquire.
yeah, the Esquire probably that makes sense. It's weird because he's doing like he has that kind of like vibrato thing going on here very early on that he would make a career out of doing later. But here it's in its infancy, which I think is really, really cool because nobody was really doing much of that at this time.
No, he was an innovator.
Yeah, yeah.
And he always innovated. We've talked about guitars on this channel. We can't help it. But name me one guitar player. I mean, Jeff Beck constantly morphed throughout his whole career as a player. You look at Jeff from this era, you look at Jeff and, there and back in that era, even to when he, shortly passed away in his technique, he constantly developed his technique. He constantly grew. He was just an amazing player. He always changed throughout his whole career. Just absolutely marvelous. And to watch like those live videos, um, his later stuff, within the last 10, 15 years. He's just amazing,
Yeah,
just an amazing player.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, 1965, to watch Jeff then, I know we always hear about Hendrix and we hear how Eric Clapton was totally blown away by Hendrix. Like Clapton thought, I'm just going to pack it in. What's the point? Hendrix coming on the scene was like, people must have just went crazy.
Yeah.
And Jeff Beck, if you compare Jeff to Eric Clapton, I bet just watching Jeff play then, all the slide stuff and all the weird, quirky stuff that he was doing, and he was fairly heavy player. People must have just have been knocked out by him, you know? You never hear that much about that. But just from the studio stuff on here, I'm just knocked out by him.
You
Just
have
saying.
to wonder, like, if Hendrix never happened, would Beck have been that guy that
He
everybody
might have
talked?
been, I think he would have been the guy.
Yeah. I think he just got, unfortunately, they came out, all the three of these guys came out at the same time, and one was bound to rise above. And Hendrix had that whole kind of theatrical wildness about him, the stage show and everything, which the other two to an extent didn't really have, especially not Clapton. Beck to an extent, but I think that had a lot to do with it as well. Because I mean, Hendrix had all this other stuff, lighting the guitars on fire, picking with his teeth, playing the Star Spangled Banner, the using feedback and all these pedals and shit. I mean, that helped. But like I said, if there was no Hendrix, I mean, Beck was doing shit that nobody else was doing at the
He
time.
was doing shit nothing nobody else was doing.
Yeah.
And I just think, well, things work out the way they do. But think about it. If you would have heard Hendrix, let's say you're a Monterey Pop Festival, Pete, back in the day, you were like 20, 22, and you're in the Monterey Pop Festival, and Hendrix has dropped down from the heavens to do his set. You would just sit there, your mouth would just be going, there was nothing like it.
Yeah.
Like he came from outer space.
Yeah. Yeah. And quite frankly, it's like I think when it goes to Beck, the Jeff Beck group were supposed to play at Woodstock. They pulled out. They decided not to
That
play.
would have
Big
changed their.
mistake. That would have changed the career not only for Jeff Beck but for Rod Stewart as well. And I think that was a major, major reason why the Jeff Beck group never achieved what they probably could have, and they imploded too quickly. But yeah, I think
Yeah.
that was a big mistake. That was a big
Yeah, it's
mistake.
like
Can
the
you just
Beach
imagine?
Boys.
Yeah,
Beach Boys not appearing at Monterey, they pulled out too.
yeah,
And things were changing at the time.
yeah, yeah,
Man, you got to be current. You've got to show up for stuff. You never know how things are going to be change overnight. And I think, yeah, if Jeff Beck Group had been at Woodstock, I think that the whole things it might have changed history because people there would have probably seen him and just went, "Holy crap!"
And just imagine you're watching the Woodstock movie a few years later, and all of a sudden there's the Jeff Beck group playing "You Shook Me" or "Ain't Superstitious"
Yeah.
with that crazy guitar and that wild Scottish singer, right? All of a sudden, that band is enormous, right?
So anyway, there you go.
Yeah,
Like a Jeff Beck show.
I
All
know.
right, so next track is Train kept a coming, Train kept a rolling. Oh my God, Aerosmith, anyone? Come
Yeah,
on, great song, great smoking guitar
yeah,
fuzz solo from Jeff Beck. I mean, what Beck is a better guitar player and an added energy to the Yardbirds. Early metal, Train kept a rolling. Think about it. For 1965, it's pretty heavy.
yeah,
I mean, it rocks hard.
yeah.
But then you've got side two, which is fine. I think there's a lot of energy here. All these tracks are from Five Live Yardbirds from the first quote unquote album by the Yardbirds. And you've already covered it. It's just basically a lot of harp, not so much Eric Clapton, but the band sounds good. We got an early band. This is all recorded. I think this is came out in 64. So this is pretty early. For a band like this, they have a lot of energy and they sound great. But I do agree with you. I think it takes away from the album
I think so.
to
Yeah.
have the studio side and then the live side. It's just a collection of tracks, but I'll tell you, that side one on this record, one of their better sides, I must say. Everything flows together and it works real well. Side two is just a document of their live. It's fine. But I do like it okay. So there you go.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, it's a great, like I said, there's a great EP there. That's kind
Side
of
one is an EP a great EP. But
Yeah.
if you look at lists, there's a lot of lists like Rolling Stone. This is one of those albums you have to hear before you die. There's a
Oh, for sure.
book, thousand albums you have to hear before you die. Yes, you have to hear this.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not a great record, but there are great tracks.
Great
The
tracks on
tracks
it.
are better than the album.
Yep.
And just to see where Jeff Beck was at this time, you just have to,
Yeah.
yeah, it's wonderful stuff.
Yep. All right, my number three is Little Games from '67. So you got, like you mentioned, Jimmy's now replaced Jeff as the lead guitar guy. Chris Treasure goes over to bass from rhythm guitar. Paul Samuel Smith is gone. A lot of people showing up in the studios to help out here on percussion and things like that,
Mhm.
whatever. But I think this is like a really weird psychedelic album in spots. But not in a bad way. I mean, the title track is a really good psychedelic hard rock song. I like it a lot. You can tell that Page is firmly like in charge of this band. I mean, you can right off the bat. I think Smile on Me is rocks hard, got some smoldering lead guitar. Like you mentioned, White Summer, you could drop that onto a Led Zeppelin album and it would fit right in. I think anybody who loves the acoustic stuff he did in Zeppelin, boom, right there. So
Boom.
good. Tinker Tailor Soldier Sailor, like we mentioned, fun, mid
It's great.
60s British invasion type stuff. It sounds like The Who, sounds like the Small Faces. If you like that sort of thing, you'll love this. Maybe the Kinks, really good. Glimpses, kind of weird psychedelic pop, Drinking Muddy Water, original track, bluesy. It's not all that original, even though they wrote it, but it's pretty cool. No Excess Baggage rocks hard. I don't like the piano barroom boogie stuff on this album at all. Like, what is it? Stealing. Don't like that at all. And then there's another track on here which does the same thing, which I don't really like at all. But I could do without that. But only the Black Rose. We talked, I remember I mentioned the Moody Blues earlier. Some of the stuff on this album and even the album before it, where they do this kind of like haunting symphonic pop stuff, reminds me of the Moody Blues, but you hit the nail on the head. It's missing all those background vocals the Moody Blues had.
Yeah.
It's like it's got Keith Relf and nothing else. And it's like,
Hmm.
so I'm missing the Mellotron, right, from the Moody's, but I'm also missing those rich vocal harmonies. But I think it's very similar style stuff. I also get a little Simon and Garfunkel on that track as well. Little Soldier Boy is fun. That's kind of cool. What I really like, there's some really cool session tracks that they did for this album that I think were released as singles that they threw on this with later reissues. Like
Hmm.
Ha Ha Said the Clown, weird song. 10 Little Indians, also really weird. But then there's that song Think About It, which totally cranks. It's got loads and loads of Jimmy Page guitar. And I'd urge everybody to go listen to this song because the guitar solo is almost note for note a guitar solo that winds up on the first Zeppelin album. So go check that out. Very, very cool. So yeah, Little Games. Fun album, weird album, some
Weird.
really great stuff, some stuff that I don't really know what to think of, but whatever. And my number two is going to be For Your Love, the debut here in the States. You know, there's lots of really good, memorable stuff on here. Title track is classic. It's just totally classic. I'm Not Talking has Beck doing some crazy whammy bar stuff. I think the couple tracks that Jeff Beck appears on here are just tremendous. Putty in Your Hands is straightforward, but I really like it. I Ain't Got You is good. It's got really good Clapton lead guitar on that one. Got to Hurry Again is a cool instrumental. You get to hear all Eric on that, which is pretty good. Yeah, there's other good stuff on here. There's some of the tracks have a little too much harmonica for me, but sweet music doesn't do a lot for me. I tell you, their take of Good Morning Little Schoolgirl is like just sounds different than everybody else that would do it afterwards. Very, very different. Um, Sloopy is fun. This one was a top 100 album here in the States. So I
Yeah.
think to me, there's the reason why this one is so high is there are songs on here that are just absolutely amazing. There's a few that I don't really get into all that much, but again, the good stuff elevates it sort of. So yeah, it's my number two. I think we both have the same number one now. We've done this a
Yeah.
couple
Well,
times in a
there.
row now
Well,
here.
yeah.
Yep.
I'm to do that.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. So my number one, or I guess our number one, you can either call it Over, Under, Sideways, Down, or you can call it Roger the Engineer, 1966. Paul Samwell Smith, the
Yep.
bassist, he produced it. I think he did a fine job. Well, the manager. See, I don't know how Giorgio, I really need to
What the
read up
connection
on
is, right? Yeah.
because he produced a lot of those other runs and then he's not there anymore. Who knows? Whatever. But this album is all Jeff Beck. Thank you, Jeff Beck. And it's all written by the band. And I think they did a great job. Yeah, is it a perfect record? No, but it sure is fun. Lost Woman. Oh, the other thing is, I want to mention when you listen to this record, how good it sounds,
Yeah.
sound quality wise, because a lot of the Giorgio stuff sounds real kind of murky. There's not much separation. And, there's been a lot of over the years, if you go on the Steve Hoffman site and look up the Yardbirds, people don't know what master tapes are out there anymore. The Yardbirds catalog is very complicated. There's been so many reissues. People are always wanting to know what is the best sounding Yardbirds collection because the tapes, I don't know where the tapes are. Well, they obviously know where the tapes are for this because this sounds great. But all the early stuff, it just seems to be we don't know much about it. But Lost Woman is the opener. What a great opener. Nice stereo separation. Now, this album was mixed for mono as well, and I'm just going off the stereo mix. The guitars on here kind of remind me of Pete Townsend. And when I listen to it, it just seems like Jeff Beck's just about ready to pop out of the speakers. Uh, Great bass from Mr. Smith. He does a great job here. This next track, Over, Under, Sideways, Down, one of my favorite tracks. It's psychedelic. It reached number 13 in the USA. Psychedelic masterpiece, as far as I'm concerned. Great guitar from Jeff. Great songwriting. These guys, I wish they could have wrote more before because I think this is a great song. I can't make it back. I can't make it your way. We've got, well, it's kind of like a basic blues song, but you've got guitar feedback probably the first time since the Beatles' I Feel Fine. I
Yeah.
mean, we're talking that's pretty wild. And Jeff is just on that note and just carrying it out. I dig it. Um, it's hard to believe you have a basic blues track and then you've got Jeff Beck wailing and feedback in the background. Just nuts. I love it. Farewells are like a piano based track with harmonies. Love it. It's quite a departure, but then you've got that Middle Eastern influence again. That's all over this record. Phenomenal. Um, Hot House of I can't even Omar. I don't even know what to.
Omar Garashid or something like that.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Omar
can't pronounce
Garashid.
that. I don't. You know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of something. I Want Be Man by Cheap Trick off of All Shook. Kinda. I wonder if. Well, Rick Nielsen. I think in Rick
Rick
Nielsen
was a
on
big
Little
Beck fan.
Games.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Was the Cheap Trick song a little bit of a, tipping the hat to this? Maybe. But
Mhm.
that's what it reminds me. Now, obviously, this is a throwaway, but you've got yet another Jeff Beck psychedelic solo tossed in there for good measure. It just seems like, you hear this and it sounds like the band's short on songs. Oh, that's fine.
That's cool. Yeah.
Beth Beck sounds good on it. It doesn't make me want to go throw up in the corner. I think it's okay. Then you've got
He's a big
Jeff's
surf
Boogie.
guitar fan, so yeah, it's not
Yeah,
surprising.
yeah. Jeff's Boogie opens up side two. It just shows Jeff's abilities. I don't know if we probably should have had this open side two because it could be considered filler, but it's pretty impressive playing, before Hendrix ever showed up on the scene. I was quite impressed and I like Jeff's Boogie, but I have no problem with it. I just don't think maybe it should have opened up the song. I think maybe opened up the album, maybe have something a little bit stronger. All right. Well, like He's Always There, which was the second track. That would have been a better opener. But you got more fuzz guitar. I'm good. Turn into Earth. You got more Middle Eastern song sounds on here. Very psychedelic, Pete. Man. Now, if you really listen to this, what I hear
Well,
strings, but
I thought I was hearing a Mellotron, but 1966, nobody's using a Mellotron at that point in time. I'm
no.
thinking that's Beck's guitar.
It's Jeff Beck wailing in the background.
Yeah.
He is like producing like He sounds like a mellotron, but you have to see. I was listening to it with headphones,
It's very
and I'm
thin,
going,
right?
it's
Very
very thin, but that's Jeff wailing in the background. Everybody, listen to Turn into Earth. You
yeah,
have to listen to it with headphones and listen to Jeff Beck on this track. Phenomenal. It's very sparse production, but it's very cool.
yeah.
What he's bringing to this record is phenomenal. What do you want? Another decent rocker? Very cool riffing by Beck. Is it filler? I don't know. It's more feedback driven.
It's a garage
Yep.
rock song.
It's
It's
a
all it is.
garage rock with
It's
feedback
good.
guitar solo by Jeff
Yeah.
Beck. Yay. Uh, Final track is Ever Since the World Began. Eastern. It's evil sounding. It references Satan in the beginning. Is this that far off from the first Black Sabbath album? I'm throwing it out there. Don't throw any rocks at me, but think how heavy this is. It gets uplifting in the second half, you know, but it's still talking about the devil. And we chant in the background, we don't need money, but it just seems very heavy and dark. It's like Sabbath could have taken this song and just tweaked it a bit, but that's what I'm thinking. It just seems very doomy and heavy. I like it. I think it's great.
It's a really good song. Yeah.
Really great song. Yeah, there are some things on here that aren't great, but I think as an album, I think this one works out the best.
Yeah. I would agree.
Paul Samuel Smith, the producer, very good for the band. Yes, excellent. He knew what he was doing. Recording is sounds really wonderful. Jeff is all in there. Yeah, songs are good. What's filler is filler. Yeah, you could probably whittle this down to make it a freaking incredible EP. But I think as a Yardbirds album, this is number one. This is the best one.
I mean, I think the whole album itself is barely over 30 minutes anyway, right? So,
Damn near an EP.
yeah, so it's yeah, I would agree. I think it just as a whole, this album works the best out of all of them as an album, I think. And there's some just great tracks on here. Lost Woman is a great opener. And the James Gang went and did their own version of this a couple of years later on their Your album, their debut album, which was also really good too. And instead of the harmonica, they just had more guitar, right? But basically the same thing. Yeah, I mean, and the title track is just, ah, I mean, could Over on the Sideways Down be the best song from this band?
Yes.
Could very well be. Could very well be. It's just great.
Yep. Yep.
And I love like Jeff's crying guitar strains on I Can't Make It Your Way, which is like kind of like this weird, dreary ballad, but there he comes in with it's just so good. Yeah, there's a lot of great stuff on here. A lot of great stuff on here. And I think you mentioned it too, the fuzz guitar on
Yeah.
He's Always There, right? I mean, it's like you got Jeff and you got Dresha both with this real fuzzy riffs going on. It's very, very cool, very, very different. So I almost wish they used more. I mean, I know it's early, but I almost wish they used a little more fuzz in some of their stuff. But if they would have kept going, with this lineup maybe for another year or two before Page came in, who knows what they could have done. But yeah, it's such a interesting catalog because it's so brief and there's not a lot there. I was thinking about when I was re-listening to some of this stuff, thinking about some of these bands, the Yardbirds, the Beatles, Hendrix, Cream, the Doors. I mean, who like this output of stuff over just a couple short years, and then poof, they're gone. It's like it's amazing how some of these bands cram so much into such a small window of time that it's almost like they didn't have enough time because the Yardbirds are a perfect example. It's almost like they didn't have enough time to really grow as a band because of all the lineup changes and the different producers, and before you know it, they were done. And you have to wonder if like one of these lineups would have stayed together for 3, 4, 5 years, what they could have done together. We'll never know, obviously.
Well, they hadn't have fired Jeff Beck.
Yeah.
Uh, but who knows what inner band turmoil was going on. I'd love to have had more Jeff. Nothing against Jimmy Page at all. I love Jimmy Page. Um, but it was just that era. There will be another era like it. 1966, hell, 65, 66, 67.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things were changing so fast, and the Beatles were pretty much running the show. People are trying to catch up, but they were on another level.
Yeah.
Whether people like the Beatles or not, I'm just saying there was so much creativity during this period. You know, people were playing guitar like it had never been played before. You know, people saying, well, like Eddie Van Halen came on the scene. People listen to that's like he got dropped down from another planet. Yeah, no one played like that.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep. It's true.
and Jeff Beck, uh, Jimmy, same kind of thing. But it was just such a wonderful era. And music will never, once you had that, it's here and gone. It'll never be anything like that again. I
No,
don't think.
no, not
There
no,
hasn't been.
no. There had in a long time. In a long time.
Not whether you like the 60s or not, but man, the creativity. Look how Jimi Hendrix those records, the Jimi Hendrix Experience albums, just absolutely, he was from another planet.
He was from
They're
another
just,
planet. You had Eric and the Blues Breakers and Cream doing some
and
amazing stuff.
Cream, how heavy that was.
Yeah,
Jesus.
yeah. You had the Beck
It was a
stuff.
great era.
You got Blackmore coming around. You got guys like Joe Walsh and Peter Green, and God, we can go on and on and on. Alvin Lee, and just there's a lot of stuff happening. But
Yeah,
yeah,
this was that whole era where all the kids were all inspired. Guitars companies were selling guitars. They couldn't build guitars fast enough because the Beatles, everybody wanted to be in a band.
yeah.
God, it was just, I was born 10 years too late, to be quite honest. Because, to be a kid during this era when everything was fresh and new and
Yeah.
everybody's starting a band and everybody's,
When you and I were old enough to know better, all these guys were like doing other things or they were
yeah.
dead. It's like, yeah, I know.
But that's what's nice though, Pete, looking at a catalog like this, because it kind of takes you back and you
Yeah,
just have to evaluate
yeah, yeah.
how things were then. God, it would have been exciting to see Jeff Beck up there just wailing
Oh, at this time,
on
yeah.
a guitar, doing things you'd never seen before.
Let's see here. I love looking at like these old photographs there. Look at
Yeah,
that.
what's he? I can't tell, but is that him playing the Okay, what's Jeff
He,
playing? Les Paul or is he playing the Telecaster?
honestly, you can't tell because he's standing sideways and you can't even see the head of the guitar or the
Mm.
neck. I have no idea. But let me look and see if there's other pictures on
I mean, a
the.
lot of this was he's playing the Les Paul.
Let's see. Here's Clapton on a telly. Come on, where's Jeff? Yep, there he is on a Les Paul. I don't know if you can see it.
It's got like
Small.
a black pick guard.
He's there
Yeah,
with
there
the.
it is. He played that a lot. Yep.
Yep, he's playing the Les Paul there. Yep, and up here he's got the yeah, it looks like a black Les Paul with a black pick guard.
Mhm. Well,
And
you got Jimmy Page, that Telecaster he was playing all on the first Led Zeppelin album. Jeff gave him that Telecaster. He got that Telecaster from Jeff because those guys were buddies.
here's the
They
white
grew up together.
he's got the white telly right there. I don't know if you can see it, but there's the
Yeah.
white telly with the black pick guard. I think that's what Jimmy played quite a bit. And let's see if we got any early stuff here with oh, look at this. Here's a classic shot right here. There's Jimmy with the
There's
white
the
telly
tele.
with
Yeah.
that psychedelic pick guard, right?
And that's the guitar that was all over the first Led Zeppelin album.
Yes, yes. In fact, Fender has made a relic of that. You can actually get that Jimmy Page guitar now. It's fairly expensive, but and yeah, and here is Jimmy playing. Well, he's playing a bass. He's playing a
Yeah,
Gibson
that's
330, one
that.
of those 335 basses right there.
There's probably Paul Samuel Smith's bass because that looks
Probably.
like it.
Yeah.
And he just, all right, I'll play that. That's fine. They didn't give a crap out then. But
Yeah.
yeah, he was the bass player for
I know.
them, and Jeff was the lead guitar player.
Yeah. Crazy, right? For a short,
And you
short
never
period of
would
time.
think that, Pete. But it's just that's the way he did. That's just what they did.
Yeah.
They already gave Page a shot, and he, declined and said, "Well, who you should get is Jeff Beck." That's how Jeff got in the band because of Jimmy. But they wanted Jimmy originally, which I totally get. But he was still doing studio stuff. He was happy doing that.
Yeah.
I
Perfectly
guess the
content.
reason he kind of gave up studio stuff, I guess it just kind of lost its luster. You know?
You want to lead a band. I totally get it. Totally get it. As most of them did. Blackmore did the same thing. He was a studio
Yeah.
guy before Deep Purple got together. So yeah, playing for Screaming Lord Such and
hmm
whatever.
But God, think about it. I know we're on a guitar ramp. This is fun. Uh, if you just think about it, Blackmore as one of those players. Look, he got his chop from playing all those sessions, man. Same with Jimmy
All these
Page,
guys
man.
did. All these guys did.
He's playing sessions all the time.
Yeah.
And look what it made. I
I mean,
mean,
just think about
Richie
Clapton.
Blackmore, one of the best players ever on the planet.
Yeah. Blackmore, Page, and Clapton played tons of sessions. Beck did as well. That's what they did early on. They just play with everybody, and they play with this band, that band. They came up on the blues scene, and yeah, it's Peter Green, another one, Mick Taylor, right? All these
Yeah,
guys, they were session guys. They were young
great.
kids. Yeah,
But playing all day, doing
playing all day,
sessions makes
making
you
a
pretty
couple
darn
bucks, right? You
good.
don't even get your name on the single or nothing. It's whatever. You just got your paycheck, lay down your guitar parts. That's it. Nobody needs to know who the hell you are or are. It's like that's it. It's crazy.
There you go.
So for everybody watching, rank these albums as you like them down in the comments below. And for our UK friends, obviously you've got a different set of releases, so feel free to rank the UK releases if you'd rather do that. That's
Be
totally
pretty
fine.
short.
Yeah, it'd be pretty. It would be pretty short. And if you're, not quite discovered the music of the Yardbirds yet, and you want to kind of take some of our recommendations, you can find most of these on. Obviously, if you can go out and find the vinyl, sure, on CD. A couple of them are hard to get, but like I said, if you want to go the route that I did, this came out in 2001. This is the Yardbirds Ultimate, and it's got much of what we talked about today. So all in one 2 disc set. Because again, most of these songs are like a minute and a half to 2 minutes to 3 minutes long. That's about it. So you got a cool booklet explaining the whole history. So yeah, there we have it. Grant, what's coming up on the Warehouse and the Contrarians?
Oh, goodness gracious. Well, later tonight, we will be doing a listening party, and Count Ralphus and Tony Dio will be on, and we will be doing two hours of 80s metal.
Nice.
So that's going on, and everybody's all worked up about that. They can hardly wait to see what the Count and Tony Dio come up with.
Cool.
So I'm working on it right now. I'll have it ready, but it's going to be a fun show. And then, well, the week after, you're booked, and we will be doing how would you uh hard prog?
Progressive rock songs that rock.
Progressive rock songs that rock. I can already see the graphic now.
Yeah.
So stay tuned. That'll be next week. And then Contrarians, of course, we're still doing the live show on Wednesday. There's always content coming out on there, but Martin's kind of taking a break because Martin's very busy. So we've been doing the live show anyway, which is fine. No big
He's got some
deal.
books he's got to get done. I know.
Yeah, he's got to get these books done. We've got this Sea of Tranquility thing coming up in December.
Yep. Yep.
So get those done, Martin.
Yep.
But there's always stuff coming out, but I'm really looking forward to having a Count on tonight because the Count, if anybody saw the last show, God bless the Count. He is literally the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Ralph is
he'll
awesome.
be on. He's fun.
Ralph is
But
awesome.
I hadn't had Tony Dio on. It was Count's idea to bring Tony on. I said, well, hey,
Tony's a good guy. Yeah. I've had him
let's
on SOT a few times. Yeah. He's a good guy.
bring him on. That's fine. I'll need his tracks.
And how
So
about that
bring
great
him
show
on.
with George LeMay last week?
George LeMay.
Yeah, that fusion.
That fusion show was good. Everybody
Great.
liked it. In
Yeah.
fact, there was that one part in one song where it segued out of one track into the other. And I had done such a good segue. I didn't realize the song that changed. And everybody went, Grant, wait a minute, graphic. And I'm going, what? I didn't even realize it
The song stopped.
because I'm over here pressing buttons and I'm doing this and I'm trying to run everything. And I didn't even, but yeah, George, that was a great show.
Yeah, that was good. I made it to half of that one, and that was enjoyable. You guys picked some really good stuff. So
Yeah,
cool.
George is the man. Everybody liked it.
Yeah,
So I'm assuming, I think we're going to do another one. Yeah, we're going to do a part two because everybody wanted a part two. So
there's so much to choose from. So yeah, very easy to do.
it's so much fun. If I could just do one thing, it'd just be those listening parties, but I can't monetize them. I can't. It's just something to do that's fun
Yeah,
and have people on the show and they can share what they like. Like here's a fusion track you need to hear. That's the whole idea behind that. And George brought a whole bunch of great stuff, and a lot of people went, "Wow, that's wonderful stuff." So
yeah,
it's
it's good,
fun.
good stuff. So yeah, so you'll see me on Grant's Rock Warehouse a week from today,
Yeah,
8 o'clock, right? 8 p.m. Eastern Standard
8
Time.
p.m.
Yeah. So for progressive rock songs that rock, I'm going to try and pick some stuff from the heavier end of the spectrum from a lot of bands you've heard about, because a lot of prog bands also do stuff that is fairly heavier or heavy-ish in spots. So yeah, so that's what we'll be doing. So join us then, and stay tuned. Coming up here on the channel, we have Grant and I will be back along with Brendan Snyder and Scott Lade later tonight. We're going to be doing another episode of our What Is It series, and this month we're going to be talking about the Alan Parsons Project, kind of what that band is all about. How do you classify them? We're going to get down to the bottom of it. We're going to try to anyway. So that's coming up later today, and then tomorrow, of course, is the Hudson Valley Squares. We will be looking at 4 classic Doom debuts and doing an album war. So that's coming up. So if you're a fan of bands like Trouble and Cathedral and Saint Vitus and Candlemass and Pentagram, those are the bands we're talking about, all their debuts. So tune in tomorrow night. It says 5 of them, not 4, in the album war. So that's coming up tomorrow night on the Hudson Valley Squares. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. We'll see you next time here on Ranking the Albums. For Grant Arthur, I am Pete Pardo. Have a good rest of the weekend, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.